To be honest, this is actually one of my favorite episodes of this particular block. And that may sound weird because it's not exactly a big, boom kind of an episode like we've already had and like we will continue to have. I mean, this is basically the lull, right? We've seen the Shadow War and the Vorlon conflict, and that's kind of ended. And we're obviously and clearly building up to what's going to be a conflict with the Minbari Civil War and the Earth Civil War. This is just kind of setting the stage. But it's very personal, and I love the character focus. You guys know me. I tend to eat up character stuff. Let's talk about one thing really quick before we get into the overall, the two stories of the episode, and that's Mike Vihar, or Vijar. I'm not actually sure how it's supposed to be pronounced. It's a J, and I don't know why, but every time I see a J, I think, yeah, like a Y. I don't know why. Anyways, this is actually his 9th Babylon 5 episode, but I bring it up because this is probably the first episode where I started really noticing the directing. I've noticed this in general about myself lately. As I'm going through more and more works, I'm starting to notice the directing of works a lot more than I used to. And I'm not really sure 100% what to make of that. Yet, as I was going through this, I was like, I recognize this style. This is really familiar. For those of you not familiar with the name, Mike Vijar, or VR, or Vihar, or however you're supposed to actually say it, he's actually a pretty big director over on Star Trek as well. He's done quite a few episodes of DS9. Rock and Shoals comes to mind immediately. And he's done a decent bit of Voyager and a decent bit of Enterprise as well. Usually he does some good work. He did The Void, just to name one example right off the top of my head, again. So it's kind of funny, because there's a lot of scenes in this episode which are very well directed and very well slanted. Sheridan and Ivanova, when they're getting prepped for the news media, is a good episode, or a good example of that. There's the bit with Londo and the Drawl ambassador as they're going back and forth through like the stuff that's covering the screen, but only very strategically. Just little details like that. It was very noticeable, and I liked it. So let's talk about the smaller plot of the two plots. That would be the one about Sheridan. Now, first of all, what we have at the beginning of the episode is a very classic example of exposition by conversation. Now, this is not bad writing. I don't want to call it that. But it's usually considered one step up from as you know. Now, it's not as you know. As you know is actively bad writing. As you know is when you say, hey, Bob, here's something that you've known about for years, and there's no reason for me to tell you, but there might be an invisible camera listening in on us, so I need to expose it to them. It's just bad writing. This is better than that, absolutely, but it's always something that's just kind of made me go, because in this case what's happening is the characters are discussing the events of what's happening, and therefore expositing as they kind of go back and forth. What about this? Well, I don't know about this. Yeah, we're not going to get this happening, though, especially after this happened, It is far more natural. It is still good writing. It's just, I don't know, something about it has always bothered me. And then Sheridan's just kind of chuckling in the background and having a good old time as he's observing their conversation and kind of cracking under the pressure. And you could tell he's thinking. And it's pretty obvious that what Sheridan's doing is he's trying to postulate, trying to discover, okay, what do I do about this? What do I do about this? And we've already established that it's a big issue that the non-aligned league of worlds are slowly pulling out of their unification. And with the Droch just having been added to the picture, and the raiding that's been going on, this is an issue. Never mind the fact that, as I just mentioned, we have 2 civil wars brewing in the background. So we have to do something about this. And you can tell he's just frustrated about it. He's just, there's got to be something. There's got to be something I can do. There's got to be some way to deal with this. Now, one question I have for you, and I feel like this is up to interpretation. Do you think Sheridan is more relaxed because Delenn is not around? Because, he's, in her own words, trying to discover himself, be strong on his own, etc., etc. In other words, trying to not lean on her and therefore find his own strength. And therefore, this is just Sheridan being Sheridan, which is entirely feasible since, as we know, Sheridan's kind of a goofball, actually. Or is this Sheridan cracking under the strain of all the weight that's on him right now, and the fact that he no longer has someone to help him through that? Take your pick. I don't actually know which it is, and I don't know. I don't know what I would put my stamp on for that one. It's an interesting situation. So then we see in this episode Sheridan being the one playing at manipulation, and it was a treat to see. It is classical manipulation. What he is doing is almost textbook manipulation. However, it's the kind of manipulation you can't do unless you have the tools available. In his case, he has a fleet that can obey his orders. He has a news broadcast station that will do things he asks to. And he has favors with high-ranked and powerful and important ambassadors who will do as he requests. He already has the tools at his disposal. Now, I say classical manipulation to explain a little bit what I mean by in this case. This is, the most obvious example of this is nothing at all happened on this date at this time in this location. Now, any form of logic will look at that and say, why are you bringing attention to that? Why would you do that? Why would you specifically single out that moment and then say nothing happened? We never even heard about anything about that moment. Oh God, I need to look into that moment right now just to make sure. Even if you suspect that it's being done to manipulate you, you're still more likely to incline to look into it just in case it isn't, aren't you? Very classic, very typical manipulation. Again, only available if you have the tools, and that's why I call it classical manipulation, because classical manipulation has less variables. Classical manipulation is just, well, I have X, therefore Y. It's much more mathematic. You know, I have access to these tools, I have access to these resources, I'm going to phrase things and stagger things and slant things in just such a way that you're going to look at it like, well, obviously this. Because he's backing it up. He sent ships out there. He did actually send ships out to defend this area. He does have ships defending the Centauri. The Centauri are flat out denying any presence of them. It did have a news report saying nothing happened. All of these things are facts. And that ties into the overall theme of the episode. The name of this episode is Rumors, Bargains, and Lies, which is a brilliant title for an episode like this, and will tie in overall to the theme of the other plot of this episode when we start talking about that. But this really highlights the difference between deception and lying. See, to lie would be to say, "Hi, I'm Elvis," and hunk of burning love or whatever, right? Okay, so that's a lie. Okay, obviously. Deception's harder. I can't give you an example of deception off the top of my head. Well, actually, I can. I can just give the example from the episode. Deception is nothing at all happened in this sector at this time. Do not be alarmed. There is no cause for alarm. Now, that is not a lie. That is the absolute truth. But that is deceiving. It is disturbingly easy to deceive someone by telling them the truth. And it's also something that tends to be a fascinating thing when it comes to fiction, how many characters will accomplish things and move themselves forward by telling the truth in order to deceive people. When he is well written, this is usually in the books, Emperor Palpatine was a good example of this. He would often simply flat out tell people the truth at certain times in certain ways in order to manipulate them. There was another good example I was going to give you. I can't think of it. I'm sorry. The point being, it's the kind of thing that I rather enjoy when it's pulled off correctly. So it was really nice to see Sheridan being the one who's the manipulative one just for once rather than everyone else. Quick question, though. Initially, Lando's like, I don't understand. And, of course, Sheridan never explains his plan because then it would be given away for the audience too early. But I wonder if by the time is it the Drazi or the Drawl? I'm actually not sure which ambassador it is. It just occurred to me. When the D ambassador shows up, the guy, when he shows up and says it, I wonder if Lando had picked up on it by then. Lando's a pretty smart guy, and he is very politically savvy. But the thing is, this isn't really politics. Not really. Not in the sense that we usually use that word on this show. This is actually military. And that's the other reason I love it. If you really think about what Sheridan is doing, this is again, classical form of military misdirection. There are actual battles in real-life history where they would send like 15 guys or 50 guys over to this one area and kick up a lot of dirt and make a lot of noise and wave the banners around to make it look like there was something going on there. That kind of a thing. That's classic misdirection. Oh my God, look, a big attack's coming from over there. This isn't quite exactly like that, but you get the concept. This is a very military strategy, much less so a political one. And that makes perfect sense, because this is about military tactics. This is about making sure that they have the support of the non-aligned worlds in case they need it. This is about ensuring that they continue to defend the supply lines for their own good, admittedly. I know that that phrase tends to be tainted by evil people, but, we are trying to defend them against raiders and against Drock. And we're trying to overall promote the general concept of unity amongst these people so that they don't immediately descend back into squabbling nonsense, just like they were before the Shadow War. And isn't it interesting how in that meeting, where all of them are there awaiting Sheridan, they are fully united in their attempt to try and get him on their side. Oh, by the way, I hope you caught the wonderful irony of the fact that they think there's a cloaked enemy, which only the Vorlon ships can detect, and they're worried about them. So they need to come up with some kind of plausible reason, some excuse. I've got it. How about those raids and those Drock that have been attacking lately? I swear I keep saying that word. Drog. Yeah, anyways. Shadow people. Or lesser shadow people. Shadow servants? Shadow vassals? Anyways, you know who I'm talking about. Oh god, I'm wearing the wrong coat. I just realized that. Whatever. I'm sorry. I'm so used to getting into this coat nowadays, I forgot that I'm using the trench coat for Babylon 5 stuff. I'm not changing it. I'm not re-recording the last bit. The point being that they are all unified, for once, in their, actually this is actually the second time, in their support of ensuring that Sheridan go after him, and they deceive. Once again, they tell the truth. The raiders are really a thing, really happening, and the Drach are really a problem that they really need defending against. So they use that as the excuse to deceive with the truth. I love that. I love the symmetry of that. Also, Franklin's addition was a nice little bit. The way Franklin says it kind of makes me think that Franklin was let in on the plan at some point. Because he plays it perfectly. It's like, just going to get some blood. Look, I need to get going. I don't really have... And notice how he plays it perfectly. You show up, act kind of casual. Oh, it won't be quick. Bombshell, but I gotta go before I can explain more. This is just a heads up. The formal request will come later. Bye. You always make sure you scurry away before you can properly explain what's going on. Brilliant's like, no, nothing happened. Nothing happened. I also want to mention one other thing, psychologically speaking. Of course, we're talking about aliens and science fiction, and one of the things I've heard recently come up more and more is that I need to stop using real life as a basis to analyze fiction. No. Okay, now that we're past that, one thing that's very psychologically a need in human beings that just about everyone has, and whether we struggle against it or not, it's still something we have to struggle with, is the desire to win. I bet you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because I bet you've driven a car before in your life. No, seriously. How many times have you been out driving and you've noticed, or maybe you haven't noticed, but I bet now that I'm bringing it up, you will notice, that people just want to win. Let's say there's a car up here, and you're back here, and you're slowly catching up on them. They will notice you and speed up, even though they had no reason to, because they need to win. Or how many times is like there's someone going, and they just need to get around you. It doesn't matter if they can't go anywhere. They just need to get around you so they can win. I notice this all the time in my driving. It informs a lot of my tactics, because I have to drive very, I guess, defensively or offensively. I'm not sure when I'm driving, because people don't know how to freaking drive. But yeah, it's very common in just about all aspects of psychology. We need to win! And that's one of the reasons why Sheridan's manipulation against the non-aligned world, I did it again, is so amusing. Because what he's doing is trying to help them, and so what he does is he engineers a situation in which they win. They get what they wanted. Aha! We've forced him into a corner. He has no choice. He has no choice but to accept it. Even some of the guys in the background, as he's leaving, actually start saying, we did it, we won, we got what we wanted. It's like, wow, yeah. So it's always nice to see Naroon on camera. I do like the actor who plays him, and I do like Naroon as a character. Civil War is always a mess, and as we can see, I mentioned the broiling Civil War in the background thing. Well, the hard truth is that in both of these cases, the Civil War is already going, and has been for some time. It's just, for the most part, both Civil Wars haven't really come on focus on camera yet. But there is already fighting going on Minbar, and there's already fighting going on back on Earth, and of course on Mars. We've already seen a little bit of that. A civil war is something that's almost unconscionable for someone like Delenn. She sees that, and it's unthinkable. What could possibly... And it's funny, because from an idealistic perspective, and from a naive perspective, she has a very valid point. What could possibly motivate our own people to murder our own people? If you really sit back and think about it, especially from a minbari perspective, that is kind of nonsensical. But then again, it always is, because civil war is a mess. And that's kind of the point. There's, of course, also this tremendous guilt that she has. She caused this. She did this, or at least maybe she did this. Possibly she did this. I'm the one who dissolved the Grey Council. I'm the one who moved forward with this. I got rid of the balance. I am responsible for death and destruction. I have to do something about it. And for once, it's not quite about the I am the prophet or the chosen one. It's more about this is my responsibility and I'm going to stand up to it. Funny thing, though. I don't think anyone was surprised. Well, I shouldn't say anyone, but any of the major characters were surprised by the Civil War like Delenn was. Because the thing is, I bet when I earlier said, why would we fight our own people? That's unthinkable. You were probably either snickering at me when I said that, right? Or thinking, well, of course people are going to fight other people. Either through cynicism, or jaded bitterness, or harsh experience, or just knowledge of history. You could probably say in your head, oh, there's like 100 different reasons why they could kill each other. And that's absolutely true. Only an idealistic, naive person could possibly look at that and say, there's no reason for it. Now, this is going back to that whole truth and lies thing. She is, in many ways, right. But reality does not conform to such a simple, linear perspective. There's just too many people who are willing to kill and die for too many different reasons. I bet you most of the religious caste isn't even unified on whatever their equivalent of party platform is. But they're still willing to stand against the military caste, because screw those guys! They forgive me for the quote here. We know nothing about them, their culture, or their civilization or communication. However, they stand for everything we don't stand for. And they said you look like jerks. They look like jerks! Now that was obviously a joke, but at the same time it really isn't, is it? There's a great scene where Neroon and her go off into the quiet and they talk in private, and he pretty much flat out says, you did this. You dissolved the Grey Council. And the actress playing Delenn plays that perfectly. You could just see it hit her like a gong. Ugh, okay. And she has to move forward, because that's... And she doesn't even properly respond to it. It's just, what's in the past is in the past, however true it may be. Once again, circling that whole truth thing. Neroon's expression when he speaks of the tragedies going on back home, the death, the destruction, is surprisingly sincere. It makes me kind of tilt my head and wonder about it. Keep that in the back of your mind, but watch his expression. He drops... Most of the time, the actor playing Neroon wears a fairly sneering face, which I actually can't do, because I don't know how to do that. But, that's usually how he presents himself. Here he drops all of that, and he starts speaking earnestly, like with an open expression. Oh my God, people are dying. This madness, this is a fire that needs to burn itself out, which is, of course, a parallel to the old Earth-Minbari War, and seems to be very indicative of Minbari perspective in general. Yeah! Oh God, we shouldn't do this. Right? That whole what should be is kind of mentality that they have going on. Anyways. The other thing I want to bring up, though, is that he mentions, if only we had come to this understanding months ago. Maybe it's just me, and my cynicism and bitter jadedness, but I don't think that would have helped. I think that even if Delenn and Neroon had allied months ago, I don't think they could have stopped the Civil War. Possibly stopped it from getting as bad as it already has, possibly forestalled it earlier, but not actually stopped it. The problem is, and Lennier hints at this more than once, the problem here, actually, I'm sorry, the religious caste guys, who I don't remember any of their names, also kind of hint at this in this episode. There are rumors, there's cultural bias, the only thing the religious caste are good at is surrendering. There are hints that this division between them has been percolating for a really long time. That they have been artificially forced through tradition and through that their cultural adherence to tradition and to what is. Remember, I cannot lie unless I'm lying to save another, right? That kind of concept. And they're, we must follow the holy prophet. Oh, the council's gone. Oh, we can do whatever now. My point is that I have a feeling the castes, most especially the religious and the military caste, have been at each other's throats, metaphorically, for some time. It's just now it has become literal. And it's so obvious why the religious caste would do what they're willing to do. Earlier in the series, Delenn was of the opinion that I should be able to say, do this, and they do it. I mean, that's just what is. It's a very minbari perspective. I know what I'm talking about. I am the one in charge. Extraneous circumstances, opinion, perspectives, politics, none of that plays a part. Do this, go, and that should be it. It was actually surprising for Delenn in several circumstances when people started ignoring her orders. You remember that? I mention that because she still has at least some of that in the modern era. And nowadays it's like she's remaining in her little bubble of naivete by mentally dividing, there we go. I don't know what's wrong with my words today. The religious caste and the military caste, right? Now, if you don't understand what I mean by that, I'm going to try and explain better because Lord knows I'm sucking at this today. She looks at this situation, naivete, right? Very naive, very idealistic. Well, our people are better than this. So all she has to do mentally, in a typical minbari fashion, is rewrite what our people means. Our people being the religious caste. And Narun. He's okay too. She's got a category of everyone who's cool. Everyone else is terrible. And this is so clear when she gives her speeches, not only praising the religious caste and for how incredible they are, but also for condemning the warrior caste, the one who was going after Narun, who tried to go after him, and just, only the military caste. Oh, maybe the military caste was trying to sabotage the ship. She keeps reinforcing that divide there so that her worldview can remain, even if it has shrunk. A form of self-deception. Or in this case, let's be honest, this is closer to an outright lie. She has this great line, extremists would rather be martyrs. And I just laugh every time at that. It's actually funny watching the other religious cast members look at each other like, yeah. Thankfully, Lennier is Lennier. Woo! Because, Lennier has a brain. Lennier has always been an interesting character, and honestly, this episode is probably one of the better ones to really dive into his mentality. It's a shame that I don't have much more to say about it, because honestly, everything's just right up there on the screen. She lives in a different world than you and I do. Maybe you should try to see things from her perspective a little more often. He is willing to flat-out lie to her. Not deceive, to lie to her, to maintain her perspective, her worldview. He is willing to sacrifice himself rather than to confront the others in order to ensure that this situation does not escalate as it shouldn't. He then, when confronted by them, they're like, oh, you have shown us the truth, we are so humble. He says, piss off! That is Lennier when he is angry. When he has that particular tone of iron. And he's just like, I did not do this for you. I suggest you leave right now. Lennier's pissed that he had to go through with this and that they are so adamantly proving him right rather than her. Because Lennier would rather Delenn be right than himself. And speaking as a cynic who is jaded and bitter, I'm kind of with Lennier on that one. I'd rather the idealistic perspective be correct. We see in this episode 3 different shades of... I looked up for a different word, but I didn't really find it, so I'm just going to go with it. Zealotry. I know that's not quite the right word. Maybe faith works a little better. But we see 3 different shades of it. We see 2 extremes. First, we have Delenn, who is willing to... How do I put this? It's so obvious in my head. I'm so terrible at communication, guys. I'm sorry. Delenn is willing to lay it all down there on hope. She is willing to believe through her faith, through her zealotry, whatever you want to call it, that this will work out, that we can trust our people, that we can ensure a peaceful third option, that we can make this work somehow. And she is on the extreme side of that. This will work. On the other side of the perspective are the other religious people, the nameless guys, of which there are several. They are willing to do anything, lay down their lives in order to ensure their cause, in order to ensure the survival of their people. Which is actually, so the reason I devise these, the reason I put these on either side of the thing, she is willing to believe in a cause and hope. This is a positive sort of reinforcement in her zealotry. In other words, she is blind and hoping to that she will be correct despite all the other factors involved. They are blind, but in a different perspective. They are blind because they believe this is a no-hope situation, because she has betrayed them, and the only way for this to work is for them to sacrifice their lives, to martyr themselves for the cause. Only, extremism. Both of them are extremes. Lennier's the one in the middle. He's the third perspective. He is willing to martyr himself, but not for an extreme, rather for a moderate perspective. The idea of trying to believe in the hope, while at the same time understanding the cynicism. He is, to put it simply, not blind. His own analogy indicates this, seeing things through her eyes, seeing through her worldview. He has the capacity to perceive things both through the cynical and jaded perspective and the idealistic and the hopeful perspective, putting him right in the middle. And that's one of the interesting things, because that's why her side of the story is the lies. His side of the story, over on Sheridan's side, that's all about deception. But she is just about everyone involved on her side of the story is flat out lying. Now that's an interesting narrative construction, because the last thing we see is Naroon leaving to send a signal back to Shakiri and the warrior caste. Now that's wonderfully presented, because we have no idea if that's genuine, if he has betrayed Delenn, or if that's part of their plan. Because if it is part of their plan, then it's a lie, keeping with the theme of both the overall narrative work and that particular storyline's narrative construct. Because he is lying to Shakiri. Or, alright, I might be constructing a little bit, but the point is, whether he is lying to Shakiri or was lying to Delenn, one way or another, he is lying. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is a binary situation. So it still keeps the narrative flow, no matter which it is. So we, the viewer, are left to determine for ourselves, in a vacuum of true decision-making, was he lying to Delenn, or is he lying to Shakiri? Fun stuff. Good episode. Can't wait to see where it goes next. This is a quiet reminder, as usual, no spoilers. I'll see you around, guys.